What is the best and safest form of birth control that exists today?
That is my favorite question. There is no safest form. There isn't. I mean, I think that's part of the difficulty for people, right? Because there isn't one size fits all. There isn't one thing that's going to be safe for everybody. There isn't one thing that's going to be acceptable to everybody either. I think the question underneath the question is it safe to use birth control? Should I be using birth control? Because that is a huge conversation that is occurring and has always been occurring. But I think with the rise of people doing their own research, people having access to information that wasn't available to them directly before, it's not being filtered by the doctor-patient relationship. People can get great information and understand options, and they can also get a lot of weird information or misinformation or disinformation. So I think that's really what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing walking into the office. I'm having a lot of patients coming in who are very concerned about the birth control method, primarily hormonal birth control. So we'll get into, maybe we should get into what the various types of birth control methods are. But primarily hormonal birth control methods are getting a bad rap. People are fearful about it. And I think this idea of also wanting to have body autonomy, which is a completely legitimate, desire.
Yeah.
Especially in a world where we are more and more feeling manipulated and where science is very fluid. It's no longer the monolith of science, right? This is science. That's not true.
Yeah.
Right.
But at the advent of when birth control first dropped, wasn't that thought to give women body autonomy? Wasn't that like a thought to be a revolutionary advancement in medicine?
It was. And that is such a great point, because I think that people today don't have that historical perspective. Also, let's back it up and talk about birth control. So when I ask you, what birth control method are you using if you are needing it, I don't necessarily mean the pill. I think most people do mean the pill when we say birth control. So birth control is any way we are not getting pregnant, whether it's fertility awareness, which is tracking your cycles, tracking your vital signs, your cervical mucus, your temperature, all these other things. Now we have all these wearables that can be helpful, to condoms or other barrier methods. So I'm going to go through them. Okay. The barrier methods would be condoms, female condoms. Seriously, I don't think in 24 years of practice I've ever had anybody use a female condom, but I believe they still exist. Wow. Diaphragms, cervical caps, which are very hard to get these days too, sadly. We have intrauterine devices, which actually, if you want to talk about the most effective, intrauterine devices are hands down the most effective. So that's something that's put inside the uterus and stays there between 3 and 10 years, depending on the type. This is where people get confused, because 3 of them that are on the market in the US do have hormones in them, but they are not systemically absorbed. In other words, they don't impact ovarian function, brain function. They're absorbed into the lining of the uterus. They will change the quality of the cycle in terms of the menstrual bleed, maybe the pattern, the amount, but they're actually not, generally speaking, having an impact elsewhere. So this gets confusing for people, highly effective. And then there are the actual hormonal contraceptives. So that would be birth control pills, patches. There's a ring that's absorbed vaginally, working the same way. What else? Basically, that's it. And they are suppressing ovarian function. So what's happening is they're putting you into a steady state. You don't have the rise and fall. The brain and the ovary are actually kind of disengaged. They're out of the conversation. And so you're not changing the hormone levels in order to produce a follicle, spit out an egg, ovulate, then release the lining of the uterus as a cycle once you do not get pregnant. That puts you into a steady state. So that's how that works. And I think that's where people are objecting in general. And I want to ask Sid's perspective on that.
Yeah.
And then there's like things like pH modulators, like there's one gel on the market called Phexxi, which, it's pretty good. It wouldn't be my first line, but it's a gel that keeps the pH low and inhibits sperm movement. It's, listen, if you're not going to do anything, but you'll do that, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because the bigger picture, and I don't mean to interrupt, I think this is an environment in which, abortion rights are like going away. So man, that we could talk about this for the next 4 days, because this is about access to care. This is about misogyny. This is about body autonomy. This is about racism. This is about a lot of different things. This is about privilege. I mean, if you're really like, I don't want to be on the pill, that tells me that you feel like you have access to abortion services. I mean, maybe I'm making a presumption here, or that you're okay with getting pregnant. By the way, you want to have an abortion, you want to have a baby, I don't care. Like, cool, I'm a doctor. You should do what you want to do, and I'm going to help you through it.
Yeah.
But,
so what initiated, like the current conversation about like there's sort of like an anti-oral contraceptive
definitely
tenor.
Yeah.
That I'm like very ambiently privy to.
Right.
But
right.
But it's not something.
I mean, it does affect you.
It does. Yeah, it does. But I mean, I guess for most of my life, I've heard, I would hear of the birth control pill as being like this like benign, safe thing that is really powerful and empowering in the sense that it obviously prevents unwanted pregnancy.
Right.
But at a certain point over the past, I guess, 10 or so years, we've had, experts on the podcast in the past. Sarah Hall comes to mind, who, and yourself and others who have talked about the fact that like the birth control, the pill, like these hormonal contraceptives change brain function. They make you attracted to people who you wouldn't otherwise necessarily be attracted to.
I mean, there's data. It's not the best data, but there's data. And you're right. Here's the thing, and you started with this, and I want to get back to a point you made, which is so important. And that is, it's all about context, right? It's all about cultural context. I mean, I was a social psychology major, so that's probably why I love these kinds of conversations. But you're right. In the 50s, when these things were developed, this was about decoupling female sexuality from reproduction, which was enormously empowering. Now women were able to be sexual beings in a way that they had not been able to be before. And really, to say that it changed the course of history is really no understatement. I mean, there's just any kind of progress that women were able to make outside of that is absolutely linked to their capacity to go out into the world and feel like just human beings, not just like always scared about where their period is. Are they going to get pregnant? Whatever. So it's so funny that was so empowering, and now it's seen as disempowering, and that's because we're in a different state, and we also have a different perception of science, of medicine, of pharmaceuticals. We have a different perception of who's on our side and who's not. Are we being manipulated? Are we not? Do we really understand the long-term implications? Which of course we did not when that first was coming on the market. And
well, I don't understand.
It's hard to make shared decision-making when we don't have the information.
Well, when did the conversation shift, and like what are the downsides of hormonal contraception?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, the idea that it doesn't impact, let's talk about brain function specifically around mood. Absolutely, there is a set of people who are affected negatively in terms of mood, probably from progestin. So I don't want to get too in the weeds, but most birth controls are what we call combination birth control. There is a estrogen called ethinyl estradiol, and there is a progestin. Okay, it's not the same as progesterone, but it is a strong inhibitor of ovulation. Again, right, we talked about putting you into a steady state. You're not having the rise and fall of your hormones. And the rise and fall of those hormones has some impact on brain development. I don't think we can say, and I don't want to scare people, but when we're starting young teenagers on birth control pills, like what impact is that having? I don't think we can say. And I think that's because despite 50 years, 60 years of birth control pills, there hasn't really been a will to do a lot of these studies, which is why some of these studies like Sarah Hill has talked about our 50, undergrads in New Mexico in 1983, because nobody's doing these studies. Nobody wants to fund them. So that there's an issue there, right? Who's funding the science? But we know that it has an impact on mood. We see it clinically. And when you look at, it's not even post-marketing data anymore, right? This is like decades of experience. There are a group of women who absolutely are affected by certain types of progestin, and they have more mood disorders. They have depression and anxiety. Now, on the converse side, there are women who have premenstrual syndrome or PMDD, more severe forms of it, who do better without the fluctuations. So we're kind of throwing, the spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks for people. We just don't know. And I think the problem here is the lack of the conversation. So if you're 16 and you come in to the gynecologist and either your periods are really horrendous and they're causing you pain and problems, disruptive, or you're newly sexually active or going to be sexually active and you want to be responsible and not get pregnant, and the only offer you're getting is birth control pills without any conversation, that's a problem. Do I have an hour and a half to talk to every single person? No. But TikTok is talking to them before they get to me anyways now. So, but which I don't have a huge problem with that, because I don't I'd rather have you come in educated and I can steer the conversation.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody feels that way.
Well, I feel like it's a positive thing that younger people are being exposed to a diversity of viewpoints.
Yes.
Some
of the viewpoints are trash. Let's be honest. I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if you have enough of a relationship, and I've had this conversation so many times on podcasts. It's funny. Somebody a podcast host asked me what were the 3 words I said the most or something, and I said I don't know, and they were really surprised by that. And I was like, well, how do you think I learned things? So I have enough. I have enough core self-esteem and confidence in what I do that I'm okay with you coming to me with something that I don't agree with. And I also know that because of that authenticity, and I think a lot of my colleagues have this experience also, when we're authentic with our patients, they're going to trust us and they're going to feel safe. And so the conversation we have, if we're open and we're not just shutting them down, there's no conversation, take the script or go somewhere else, because I'm sure there are people who do that too. Yeah. If you have some safety, then you can have a little bit more of a conversation. And I can address with somebody, hey, you saw that, and that's there's no evidence to support that. What are your goals? Just kind of guide them back to why are they here? What is it that we want to accomplish today? Okay, so you don't want to get a sexually transmitted infection. Ding, ding, ding. And you don't want to get pregnant, and you want to manage your period. So how can we do that? And because I have a little bit of a deeper toolkit, for some of the other things, not for birth control, but for some of the other issues, I feel confident with herbs and other things that I feel like I can work with people on that. So I don't think there's only one way to do it.
What about temperature tracking?
So I think for someone who's doing it really well, who has a really good wearable, who's kind of road tested and knows it's really accurate, it can be great. But here's the problem. These things are all, when you talk about cycle tracking, some of what goes into the predictive part of it is past experience, right? So I think for otherwise healthy young people, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. You need to pay attention. You need to understand. It's not just the watching what your temperature is, because also it's behavior planning, right? So sperm can live for 3 to 5 days. So you have to okay, I know generally speaking, and this is where the predictive part comes in. I know generally speaking, my spike is coming here. So I'm going to ovulate here. So at 3 to 5 days in advance, I have to be careful. I have to be using condoms, whatever it is, abstaining, whatever it is you're doing. Because otherwise, once you ovulate, you got 12 to 24 hours with that egg, but the sperm are hanging out.
Right.
Yeah.
They can live.
So exactly. They can live. They live.
In the vag.
That's their job, is to live, right? So let's say you get really sick. Let's say you're traveling. Let's say you have an unexpected stress, a death in the family, a job loss. Your cycle is not going to be the same. So you have to be careful with that. And I think the other thing that I see is, as you start getting into early perimenopause, and that could be mid to late 30s, you can be a lot less predictable in your cycle. So I think people just have to, again, put it into the context. What are their goals? Do they understand what's going on with their body and their lives? And they can't just live and die by their Oura ring. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes it's not that obvious.
Well, it's interesting because I have no affiliation with Oura, but I know that they, the latest iteration of the ring has temperature tracking, and then you can sign up for this companion app that basically claims to be 99+% effective.
That's amazing. I would love to see their data. A lot of the times with the wearables, and there's another company that I'm thinking of, it doesn't matter, I don't remember, but you know how this works with data, Max. Come on. I mean, It's like, you can always poke holes in it. So I'm not telling people not to do that. I'm like, buyer beware.
Yeah. How does it work, though? Because I thought humans were 98.6 degrees at all times, or if you're not,
no,
you're
that's
dying.
the average. And also, our temperature changes with hormonal changes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, we have temperature spikes and
what's
around
the range?
mid-cycle.
Like women, like...
I don't know how high it can go. That's a great question because obviously I'm not a wearable girly. Yeah. Well, I can tell you as a 58-year-old, I know where my temperature is. It's way higher.
But that's likely why couples argue so often about the thermostat,
Yeah, well, for sure, especially as you get to a certain age. Oh my God, of course, like, get away from me with your hot flash inducing body heat. Not that I'm talking about anybody who dropped me off here.
Is it true that there's only like 6 or so days out of the month that a premenopausal woman can get pregnant?
Yeah,
a fertile woman?
that's like what I was talking about.
Just 6 days out of the month.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think that's what I'm saying. Like, look, I'm not here to say don't do it. I'm just like you got to be a scientist about it. It could be effective, but you got to be on it.
Yeah. What about for women with like irregular periods?
Well, right. Okay. So then like, what if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome and you have a cycle every 47 days, or sometimes you skip 3 months at a time, or like so this doesn't work for everybody. Right. Or, I mean, if you have other medical issues that have changed your cycle, then like we need to be looking at what's going on. Like why is your cycle so irregular all of a sudden, or even why is it irregular at all? So yeah, nothing works. But this is exactly what I started with. Nothing works for everybody.
Yeah.
There's not one thing.
There's not one thing. Are there any big myths? Because I know you create a lot of content on social media. It's super helpful. Any big myths circulating today on social media that you think are worth addressing?
Regarding this, or just in general?
Yeah, regarding this, but also of interest to women, because I'm not necessarily tapped into those, following those hashtags, but I think...
Well, I'll tell you what, most of them are related to absolutes, right? Like you mentioned it, like if you're on the pill, your partner selection will be wrong. I mean, I don't know that we can say that, right? Like things that scare you. So here's the red flag. If you start feeling some kind of way, if you get like some chest pain or like a stomach ache, you should listen to that, and you should really question if this content is grabbing you with anxiety and fear, like that's the goal, or is there really something there that is tapping into your own fear or anxiety, in which case it needs to be investigated more. Now, how you're investigating that is kind of complicated, right? Are you going to like go deeper into the rabbit hole, which may or may not be helpful? Do you have a trusted source of information? So I think the absolutes about the birth control, I don't think they're necessarily myths. I think they're tapping into a fear. Like I said, I think it's kind of playing into all this women finally stepping up and stepping out and talking about how gaslit we have been, because that's a real thing. But then that doesn't mean that every single thing that we hear is not true. Do you know what I'm saying? I know I'm really being iffy about this whole thing. And that has been a big conversation also, because talking about the birth control, there was a huge article, I don't remember what outlet it was, in the last probably month or so, that was looking at sort of social media influencers misinforming around birth control specifically. And of course they interviewed, a bunch of like hardline down the middle conventional docs who, are upset about this going on, and it's wrong and it's dangerous. And all it did was feed the flames and the fuel. It just fueled the fire of like, okay, so tell me that you don't want to hear what I have to say without telling me that you don't want to hear what I have to say. Women are complaining for a reason. Young women are afraid for a reason. How do we reestablish trust? The article should have been, how do we reestablish trust with our patients? What went wrong? Not like, you guys are a-holes, stop going to TikTok. Well, how is that helpful? Have these people never raised a teenager? I mean, this is like just Psych 101. Like, just don't be disrespectful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, I think, that, there's a lot. I think there are many reasons why people have, why trust has, why trust has been broken, I think, particularly on social media with regard to, a lot of these like hardline, more orthodox medical and nutrition experts, which is
oh my God, you see it so much in food and nutrition.
Yeah.
And whiplash. You should only eat
gaslighting.
That. You can't eat that.
Yeah.
You did it. You're fat. You're not fat. Oh my God.
Exactly.
Like I'm overwhelmed by it.
Right. So it's like I understand why your average person has is just like there's like a certain amount of fatigue when it comes to putting faith in the so-called experts on social media because they seem to be so like easily swayed, whether it's like the food industry covertly influencing certain dietitians on social media or
and then what is this culture of like tearing other people down and bullying?
That's become huge on social media too.
I just will not participate in it. It's so bad and it's just such a bad look. Like how are you going to trust me? Let's put it this way. I don't trust somebody who that's their brand. Like that's not good for me. Like there's a difference between myth busting and like going after whole swaths of humans or a specific person. Like why? Like the whole stitch with the person that you want to crap on, no, I'm just never going to do it. I might say it privately to you, okay? But I'm not, that's like not my job to be mean. Like I'm a grown up.
Yeah.
It's not cool.
Well, a lot of the people on social media who've made that their whole shtick, that are just like, I'm going to stitch this person and just try to discredit them. And they're just like, either they're jealous or they're just like trying to siphon off whatever clout, they can from the person that they're... No, it's awful. It's intellectually lazy. Yeah, it's gross.
Let's not feed it.
Yeah, it's gross.
Let's get rid of that part.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's going on is that this is a bad pun, but the Menoverse is on fire.
The Menoverse.
It's a thing.
What is that?
The Menoverse. It is the universe surrounding all of the talk around midlife, women's health, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. I first met you when I was coming on to talk about my book. It's so crazy what has happened in like a little bit less than 2 years. Like it's just
Give us the lay of the land.
Well, I mean, it's wild. Like the book came out and everybody was talking about menopause. And I realize my algorithm is very specific. So that's part of it. But I mean, we have just all these experts out there now, all this attention in the lay media. The New York Times ended up picking up all this stuff. The most gifted article on NewYorkTimes.com in 2023 was the article talking about, it was called Women Have Been Misled About Menopause by Susan Dominus. And it was all about what had happened 22 years ago with the Women's Health Initiative and how wrong this huge $1 billion NIH-funded study about menopause and hormone therapy had been. And, those of us in the field had been walking it back for 20-something years, and it finally got into the lay press, and it explain to women why their fear of hormone therapy and the misinformation around the risks that they did face as they got older was dangerous. And it was so enormously powerfully important. And it was the most gifted article in 2023. That is how, so this is not a small thing. So that's the Menoverse. The Menoverse is the webscape basically that involves all these experts, doctors, scientists, researchers, philosophers, thinkers, humans who are talking about what does this mean for us? When you look at women living a third to a half of their life postmenopausal, it's really important. We are humans that are on the planet. We have largely been ignored. There's all this now. Halle Berry, Drew Barrymore, Oprah, everybody's talking about it. Policy change, huge amounts of money being funneled hopefully soon into research, really reworking the data and exposing the flaws and looking at how powerfully important hormone therapy actually can be for reducing the risk of the things that actually kill us. Heart disease, dementia, osteoporosis.
Well, what were the key findings of the Women's Health Initiative?
Well, it got suspended very suddenly because what happened is that they found that women were, so the data coming up to that were similar to what we're looking at now. Like, hey, Longevity seems to be improved. Heart disease seems to be improved. Dementia, osteoporosis better. And all of a sudden they got a certain amount in. I mean, it started in the late 90s, 2002. They pulled the plug because they looked at the data and said that breast cancer risk was increased and cardiovascular disease was increased, specifically things related to stroke. Okay. But meanwhile, when you looked at who the population was, the average age was 62, which is a full 10 years past menopause. So it wasn't looking at the menopausal transition. It wasn't looking at prevention. These were women that a lot of them already had risk factors for things like heart disease and dementia. They were well on their way. So it was too late to prevent. And even the breast cancer risk, the absolute increase in risk was actually 0.8 per 10,000 users of hormone replacement therapy, which is, statistically significant and not clinically significant. And then there were a lot of other things. The hormone therapy that was being used we really don't use that anymore. None of it was biologically identical, oral, not transdermal, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of things. So, it was like the record scratch at the rave. Like everybody just stopped and people freaked out and doctors really freaked out. So that's the other big problem here. So this is what's going on. That's very interesting. Now that all this research has been turned around, now that the lay press has picked it up, now that authors like Avram Blooming and Carol Tavris, who are she's a psychologist and he was a breast cancer oncologist here in Los Angeles for years, who was doing work in this area on breast cancer survivors using hormones and on the actual risks. And, he was kind of like an outlier and people were like, who is that guy? Well, now, he's being published in all the major journals and people are finally recognizing the importance of his work in his 80s now. And all of a sudden, this evidence was everywhere and women picked it up. And honestly, social media influencers picked it up. And those of us who felt confident and comfortable discussing both clinical topics, and we were people who boots on the ground take care of women, but also had enough familiarity with academic medicine to understand how to read this data and to present it to people. And we just went straight to the people. And the people are like, wait a second, are you telling me we're not getting what we need? We don't have access? Wait a second. So there's this really interesting moment happening because there's a paradigm shift and it's grassroots. The women are saying, we want better, we need better. It's really, and it's definitely, it's gratifying, but it's also, the organizations are slow to change. And I think there are people who have been producing data for a long time who are upset that their data is being disemboweled. They don't like it too much. They're recycling it.
Yeah.
They're coming back out. The Lancet did this whole thing. And, that we're over-medicalizing menopause, but like 15% of American women are on hormones. So how are we over-medicalizing it? It's just weird.
Well, there was recently, in the Washington Post, the headline, There's no need to fear menopause hormone drugs, finds major women's health study. And this was published in JAMA?
Yes. So then JAMA, so the Lancet published this series that was essentially a rehash of the Women's Health Initiative, which is so bizarre. 20 years later, why are we doing this? Just the same points. We should do these things. Hormone therapy is not good. By the way, some of the authors of this Lancet series were authors of the Women's Health Initiative. So
that might represent like a long-standing bias.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Just not letting go. And, a group of us on social media who all talk to each other and are various experts in the field, wrote a response that actually Ms. Magazine published. And then this came out, and this is really great. This is looking, I think, at like 10 to 14 million lives, women's lives over the last several decades, aggregating the data and showing that really importantly, a very important question was answered, because the recommendations have been this like low dose for least amount of time. Oh, you revisit it at 3 to 4 years, which is made up, right? So a lot of women were going on hormones and being told, well, now you have to come off hormones at this age, or it's not safe. It ceases to be safe after a certain age. The JAMA article showed very clearly that over the age of 65, the benefits continue to accrue. It is not dangerous. You don't have to stop. And you have continued benefits. You have continued risk reduction in the areas of osteoporosis and osteoporotic fractures, dementia, specifically heart disease and all-cause mortality. And the breast cancer risk has just been overplayed. It's, I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I'm on hormones, by the way.
Wow.
I'm on hormones. I'm almost 11 years out from my diagnosis. I was diagnosed in my 40s, so kind of on the young side. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not doing hormones. And then I started reading Avram Blooming and talking to other people and going to conferences, and I was like, am I? And I got to the 10-year mark, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't feel great. And I'm looking at the data. I am more likely, 70 to 80% of breast cancer survivors are diagnosed early stage, right? Stage 1. They are going to have their 5-year survival is 99%. They're more likely to die of heart disease than breast cancer. So to prevent them from using hormones, which I just said we know is going to decrease the risk of all these bad things. Like, are we shortening their lifespan? And we're certainly diminishing their health span. Why are we doing it? And I said to myself, I know the data. I'm just going to do it. And then I started, and then it was, I was kind of like quiet about it because I realized like I have a voice and I don't want people willy-nilly doing crazy things. And, it's always a weird thing being a doctor online. Like, I'm not practicing medicine online. But I know if I say, hey, I had breast cancer, I use hormones, I know it's going to have an impact. And I started talking to my menopause friends, right? I have all these other friends, and one of whom is Corinne Menn, who's a genius, who's also a breast cancer survivor, who's also on hormones. And I realized, like, what am I hiding? This is important. So I talk about it now. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I'm here to share the information.
Are there any considerations that play a role in your determining whether or not a given patient is a good candidate for HRT?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what age are they at? What are their symptoms? So let me just say that treating somebody with hormone therapy, there's sort of 2 reasons, right? There's the symptom management, all the stuff that's being talked about now. Hot flashes, night sweats, joint aches, brain fog, vaginal dryness, urinary, there's all the things, right? So hormone therapy is just clearly the winner in treating all of those things, most of those things. And then there's the long-term health benefits. It does look like the earlier we initiate therapy, the better and more profound long-term health benefits we're going to see. And I think you had Lisa Mosconi on not that long ago. And I think, there's no definitive research yet because, almost nobody is studying women's brains other than Lisa. And it looks like the fluctuations that are unpredictable in our hormone levels in our 40s or in perimenopause may be more of the determinant for dementia specifically. So I don't think we can say definitively hormone therapy alone at any age is going to diminish your risk. I don't think we can say that. I think we're starting to be suspicious. We probably need to be starting earlier. But in general, those are the 2, like symptoms, long-term health. So symptoms, if you're 37 and you're having clearly, perimenopausal symptoms, and you don't have a reason you can't be on hormones, which is like you've had a blood clot, you have a high risk for a blood clot, you've had a heart attack, you've had a stroke. Those are really it. Cancer is a plus minus. If you're a stage 3 breast cancer patient in treatment, I'm not giving you estrogen. I mean, right? If you're 56 and 10 years past, your hormone therapy and you understand the risk benefits and alternatives and you had an early stage and, you are concerned about your risk of osteoporosis and dementia, I will start you on hormone therapy. I will do it. Yeah. It's shared decision making.
Are there like genes that might
that's a great question.
Because maybe it's like only a certain genotype that like combined with HRT produces the phenotype of breast cancer.
Well, we don't know that. And the other thing to understand, this is really, really interesting, is first of all, one of the reasons we have these widespread symptoms in menopause and perimenopause is that we have estrogen receptors all over our body, just like we have testosterone receptors all over, right? So that's why the muscle mass diminishes. That's why the joints ache. That's why the brain function changes. There are hormone receptors in a lot of other kinds of cancers too. There are brain tumors that have estrogen receptors. So just because the receptor is on the tumor doesn't mean the hormone is causing the cancer. There's a lot of things we don't understand. If you are a carrier of a high risk you're predisposed for breast cancer, right? And you're a BRCA carrier, for instance. That's a different conversation. Although, if you're what we call a pre-vivor, you have the BRCA mutation, you've done the management strategies, maybe you've had surgeries, because we will typically offer preventative surgeries, removing the breast, removing the ovaries. You can have hormone therapy. In fact, if you're 42 and we take your ovaries out, you should have hormone therapy, because otherwise we just castrated you. Like, we wouldn't do this to dudes. We don't do this to men. Why would we take away the hormones? I just told you it's going to cause all those problems.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. I mean, I think in terms of genotype, increasing risk of, we don't know that specifically. And then there are people who have genetic predispositions, like factor V Leiden and stuff, that to blood clotting. So that's a different story, because estrogen does increase risk of blood clotting. So we do workarounds.
Why there's no stigma around like TRT? I know so many guys that are on TRT.
Well, that's the next wave with women too, by the way, I think.
You think? What, that
we lose testosterone too.
Oh, and TRT you guys lose, in women.
Yes, you guys lose testosterone kind of slowly and steadily. We fall off a cliff.
Menopause as well?
Oh, yeah.
During menopause? Wow.
So women don't make more testosterone than men, but women make more testosterone than any other hormone in their 30s. More than estrogen.
Interesting.
Yes. So testosterone loss for us is a big deal. And I think there's a lot of, that's the next conversation. I can tell you that is coming. It's already happening online.
Wow.
It's really interesting. And, again, our organizations have been very conservative about this. And, we don't know. The only thing that we can present solid evidence on is, sexual dysfunction. But we know that it affects brain function, musculoskeletal system. This is really important stuff. And if we know that sarcopenia, that loss of muscle mass, is metabolically bad, and that what's really coming to get us is obesity, visceral fat, inflammatory conditions, there's like a big, what is the problem? I think we need to be looking at it.
I mean, that could play a role in the, twofold risk that women have of developing dementia compared to men.
I have questions. There's a lot of data on that, and that's kind of my newest thing that I've been looking at just for my own health. One of the big reasons actually that I wanted to start the hormone therapy was, the hot flashes were annoying me and I wasn't sleeping well, and I was thinking like dementia. And I was feeling like brain foggy. I'm super come on. This is me in menopause, okay? So you can imagine me 20 years ago. I'm very my brain is very important to me. Yeah, it's important. Everybody's brain is important to everybody.
Of course.
But I really felt the sharpness was not there. And word finding, you're on a TV show, you're on a podcast, you're in front of patients, and you're like, what is the fucking word? It's not cute in any way. It's so distressing.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So then I was like, am I going to get dementia? Really, and the other thing that happened to me is that, I'm a lifelong fitness person. I've been lifting weights for 15 years, and I had osteoporosis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that attributed to what? Decline in testosterone, you think?
I don't know. I mean, I'm like a tiny Ashkenazi person, so that didn't help me. But, I mean, really, we're predisposed. So
is Sydney. Actually.
Yeah.
Tiny Ashkenazi.
Tiny Ashkenazis. Shout out to the tiny Ashkenazis. But, that, I think the tamoxifen that I had been on for breast cancer, I've had thyroid problems my whole adult life. So there were other predisposing factors, but I was like, but I lift weights. it wasn't bad, but I was right under, normal. And I thought, this is I don't like this. So I just forget it. I don't want to get dementia. I definitely don't want to have a hip fracture. And it's not going to increase my risk of dying of breast cancer. So the dementia was the thing. Now I'm kind of on this whole testosterone kick, because I'm doing what I do. I'm deep diving. I'm talking to colleagues. I'm reading the data.
Are you taking it?
Not yet, but I think I'm going to start.
Wow.
Because one of the things that I realized in reading was that there's all this data on testosterone actually being protective against breast cancer.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Imagine if whatever increased risk is abolished when you take.
Exactly.
Because that would be physiologic, right?
Right.
Estrogen plus testosterone.
Yeah.
Damn.
Damn. I'll come back. I'll come back in 6 months and I'll tell you what's going on.
You might have stumbled on something.
Yeah, I'm into it. The thing is, I have this text thread, right, with all my menopause friends. And I, maybe like 2 weeks ago, I was like, you guys, I think I'm going to do it. And I started 6 weeks ago. I started 8 months ago. Everybody, and this is everybody that anybody follows. And I mean, nobody's like hiding it, but I was like, oh my God, I am late to this party. Why'd you guys tell me? So that made me feel better because these are women that I really respect and trust. These are thought leaders.
Yeah. How else have you modulated your diet and lifestyle to support,
A lot more protein.
Yeah.
Like not just telling other people to do it, but doing it. It's really hard and kind of annoying.
It is hard.
Please help me.
Sydney's on a high protein diet.
I do love high protein, but it's so hard.
It's a lot. And as you get older, you really have to be doing more. And then I have questions. I'm like, is this really? So I think I'm just being more on point. I think when I was younger, I just could kind of I was explaining to my boyfriend yesterday, you don't understand. When I was young, I really had such a big appetite and I could eat anything. First of all, I had a stomach of iron. Nothing bothered me.
It's rare for us Ashkenazis.
I know.
But my stomach too. I could eat whatever.
But I have 23andMe, so I know for a fact that I'm 100%, which is so boring.
100% what? Ashkenazi?
Yes.
So am I. Not 100%.
No, wait, did you get I got a little teeny bit. First, they gave me a little bit of Sardinian. I was super excited because I thought that was a little exotic.
Yeah.
And then they took it away. And I was like...
They took it away?
Yeah, I don't understand.
Your genes changed?
Also, I have questions how Ashkenazi, this is so funny. Everybody else is I'm from Ireland and Nigeria. And it's an Ashkenazi. Okay, that's another podcast.
Yeah, it's an ethnicity, though.
Exactly. And we're so ghettoized and only married each other.
Yeah.
But, okay, that's what it is. But, and then I think I got some other North African for a second. I'm not sure if they...
Basque region of Spain. That's where my 0.2%.
Obviously. Look at you.
I don't know. 99.8 Ashkenazi with a little bit from some southern...
Yeah.
Part of Spain.
Do you speak any Spanish?
I mean, I'm not bad when I if
don't they speak some in
put me for 6 months in a Spanish-speaking country?
I don't know.
Catalan or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, that's a different accent.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It's still Spanish though.
Yeah, my high school Spanish teacher was from there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they do the th.
Yes.
Yes.
Ibiza.
Yes.
What? Yeah.
Oh my God. My high school best friend's going to be mad because I can't remember his name, but I'm going to text her as soon as I leave.
So you've got a stomach of steel.
Stomach of steel. I could eat anything. I was pretty athletic. I could gain and lose weight really easily. And that just stopped. That just stopped, a dead stop. I can't, if I think about you eating ice cream, it's really, I'm sorry. It's not, I don't like it at all.
Have you seen a decline in metabolism?
Yeah.
Because there are studies that show that
but all these studies showed that it doesn't happen or that weight gain isn't real. And I'm just that is not my experience with my patients or with me. I think it's the muscle mass thing. I really, really do. I think it's that we're losing the muscle mass or maybe the quality of the metabolism is changing. And then the other thing is just the distribution, right? So, and that we know, the distribution of fat moves, especially in women, to the midsection, to visceral fat, which is then a negative feedback loop too, because you have more inflammation, all these things. So it's not impossible. It's really hard. It's one of the things that I struggle with. It's my patients struggle with it. Being more vigilant about my heavy lifting and my recovery and just, not eating late in the late at night kind of thing. I barely drink. So people are freaked out about hormones, but alcohol is a class 1 carcinogen. Alcohol is so bad for you. And then also I wonder, and we were sort of talking about this before we started, I just wonder about environmental factors and stuff that we just don't have control over, that we don't understand.
Oh yeah, it's huge. There was that study that found that there were microplastics in athromas, right?
Yes. This is a very recent study, and there's all this attention being turned toward cardiovascular disease, inflammatory conditions, and microplastics because it's in everything. It's in the ocean. It's in our food. It's it's in everything. This is what we've done.
It's awful. Yeah. I was telling you, we had an expert, Ray Dorsey, on the podcast, whose work I really want to help to amplify because I think it's so important. He believes, and he's published on this, he's a neurologist, that essentially Parkinson's disease, he believes Parkinson's disease is a man-made condition. Wow. Basically that there's 2% of cases are attributable to genetics, but the vast majority are due to some some combination of
not just like
exposures.
TBI and trauma, but like
that increases risk.
Yeah.
But generally that it's some sort of
like some neurotoxicity,
environmental exposure, pesticides,
yeah.
herbicides, or these industrial pollutants, namely a compound called trichloroethylene, or TCE, which has been used. It was used medically up until the 70s, and also in food production. It was used to decaffeinate coffee, and it was used as an anesthetic for pregnant women.
Wow.
Yeah, TCE up until.
So that just makes you wonder. I'm like 70s, a child of the 70s and 80s, and I just think like, on the one hand, I think our food sources were still closer to home. But there was a big uptick during that time in agribusiness and, Monsanto. And, I remember going to Disneyland as a kid and there was like a huge Can you even imagine this now? Monsanto had a whole section of Disneyland. You don't know this because I'm old enough to be your mother. Yes. No.
But they did?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. It was all about the future. Oh, yes.
Sponsored by Monsanto?
Yes.
Damn.
So that was like the brave new world. So I think about it and I wonder, I'm like, is that why I got breast cancer when I was in my 40s? I mean, seriously.
Well, BPA was originally
in bottles
designated to be an estrogen replacement.
Oh.
It's just
nuts.
Look
at what it sure is.
Yeah.
But the wrong kind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're just being poisoned. That's why
depressing me.
That's why I get so flustered when I see these like social media experts that might actually be experts, but that seem to so willingly go to bat for
industry,
these kinds of pollutants, which, I mean, we've gotten it wrong so many times.
Yeah, I know.
Past,
and people talking about like, it's not true that this thing isn't bad for you. And I'm like, are you sure?
Well, Parkinson's disease, I mean, literally could be like, and we have virtually no data other than a handful of small like epidemiologic studies, but like, maybe a lifetime of exposure of these herbicides and pesticides at low doses in our gut. Because we're now also the gut is like a major axis to the brain.
And that's a huge thing. And I think when we get back to like dementia, all the metabolic changes that occur, that's just, we're in our infancy around the microbiome. And there is this thing called the estroblome, right? That like how estrogen is metabolized in our gut. So we know that as we age, our gut metabolism changes, the microbiome shifts. And I think we're just starting to scratch the surface on understanding how impactful that is to our health overall. But if you look at like hormone health specifically, we know that it has an impact. And it's very interesting because when I was writing the book, I was very interested in that, and I was researching it, and I interviewed people, and they were like, yeah, you're right, but we don't know. And now, 3 years later, they're talking more about the estroblome and things like that. We still don't totally understand it, but I think you're right. So if your gut metabolism is altered by a lifetime of exposure, like everything is going to be changed.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to, I like to be nice and end on a happy note. That's the mom in me.
We like that.
That's depressing me, man.
Yeah. What's the happy ending?
I don't know. Sid.
Well, no, it's.
No, I think it was great.
Yeah.
I like your idea of talking about bringing your goals to your doctor, whether you're perimenopause, whether you're thinking about birth control, like what are your individual goals? Because that's how.
Don't get lost in the woods about like what the visit is about, like, but also understand your doctor only has so much time. So if you have some focused, like, this is what I'd like to accomplish, it's going to help the doctor help you.
And that's where TikTok's beneficial.
Yes.
Then you can
Yes.
narrow down your focus.
Yes.
Going into your doctor being like, I don't know.
Yeah. The only thing is I don't pull out your IUD by yourself because then people do. I don't know. I'm just saying.
What about you?
Or throw out the birth control pills without making sure you understand what you're doing.
Yeah. You talked about the fact that only a subset of IUDs are hormonal and they act locally, but what about copper IUDs?
The copper IUD has no hormonal impact. The copper itself is an irritant. Some people have copper allergies, not very many people. And the copper absolutely makes the bleeding much heavier because it's an irritant. So if you don't have like a crazy heavy period naturally, then your period's going to get heavier. If you have a really difficult, heavy, crampy period, it is not a good choice. But it can stand for 10 years, which is fantastic. I mean, IUDs are great. They've gotten really popular in the last, they've gotten really popular in the last 7 to 10 years. The difference was I had a run on them at the last election or the election before that. Like, people freaked out. They weren't wrong.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were like, birth control is going away. Give me an IUD. And I was like, okay. Yeah. Yeah, people got scared.
So it sounds like, to wrap up that portion of the conversation, that there's no real like easy silver bullet answer. It's like ultimately up to the patient and like the specific needs of the individual.
Yeah, and it'll change over time. Yeah. But also, please, if you're not monogamous, like, use a condom. Please. Yeah. Sexually transmitted infections are real and they're on the rise.
They're also on the rise amongst, I read,
yes,
older adults.
Yes. Absolutely.
That didn't get the STD education. Talking about sex was always sort of like taboo.
Right, and they're like, I can't get pregnant.
Yeah. So
it's like, but there's other things out there, ma'am.
Man, they're out there having a good time, it sounds like.
Listen, there's a lot of myths out there about older people. I think there's a lot of data about like how much sex older people actually have.
They're having a ton of sex right now, is what
all of them are having sex right now.
Yeah, right now. But STDs are on the rise because they just don't know.
No, for sure. Yeah. No, and it's a big problem. And then there's like weirdness around screening, right? Because there's all this weird, like, stop screening at a certain age. And I'm like, whoa, like, who are you talking to? Like, we have this data showing STIs are on the rise. And then the pap smear, screening guidelines, like, you're making a lot of assumptions about people. You're making an assumption that this person is not sexually active, or that they're sexually active with one partner, or that they know they're sexually, like, you don't know what your partner's doing. People come in and tell me all sorts of things. It's fine. I'm a vault, right? But it's just crazy. It's like the idea that like at 70, it just doesn't matter anymore. Like, we're packing it in. That's dangerous. That's a myth.
Yeah, that is a myth.
Yeah.
I've always thought it really funny that one of the Parkinson's, when you're being treated for Parkinson's disease, one of the side effects of the drugs is occasionally it can be like an increase in risky behavior, gambling.
Oh, really? Because
sexual
dopamine?
Promiscuity. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's just like a weird, funny side effect.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
For example, like Sinemet, which is like the gold standard drug for Parkinson's treatment. It's literally dopamine.
Right.
It's like carbidopa, L-dopa. Wow. L-dopa is just dopamine.
Of course.
And so you basically get addicted. The point of taking L-dopa for the Parkinson's disease patient is obviously to supplement the dopamine loss that occurs when the neurons in the substantia nigra die. But it also, it's not like those drugs are targeted to that portion of the brain.
Exactly. Wow, that's fascinating. Oh my God, I have so many ideas and questions now.
Yeah, these Parkinson's disease patients is,
going wild.
Parkinson's disease gone wild.
Yeah, I feel like
crazy times.
Yeah, wow. Who knew?
Mm-hmm. What else can I ask you?
Well, you have me.
So how do you, like environmental toxins, like how do you do, like what does doing your best look like for you these days? Because,
that's a good question.
Yeah, we live in obviously there's a lot of obstacles to good health today, more so than ever before in history. And there's a lot of fear mongering on social media and miscommunication about the actual risks of these various exposures. Although I do think it's important to be mindful of them. How do you prioritize what to look out for?
Yeah. I think, first of all, I'm very privileged in that I can afford to be selective about what kind of food I bring into my home. And I really do stick with organic as much as I can, grass-fed. I don't eat a ton of red meat, but I do eat red meat. And I absolutely, like I said, my protein intake is really important to me. And I do eat animals. I have ideas about that. I feel like if they're treated ethically, I think it's okay. We're human beings.
Yeah.
That's my perspective. And I think it's healthy. And I have been a vegetarian at different points in my life, and I was less healthy. So that's how I do it. So I'm really, like, certain things I'm really a bear about. Anything where there's like fat accumulation, like, so any dairy, any animal product is going to be organic. I really don't drink. I barely drink alcohol. I will admit, during the pandemic, there was nothing else to do. I mean, I wasn't an alcoholic, but like that was our activity at night. Was like there was nothing to do, and it's so bad. It's so bad, you know. So I really barely drink.
But the dose makes the poison.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And I wasn't drinking 3 drinks a day, but even like a cocktail every night. And I think for me, as I was getting older and as a woman and as a breast cancer survivor, there was just a lot of reasons to not be doing it, including like I don't process it the way I used to, right? So I would wake up, I don't feel great.
Yeah.
My sleep is super important. So I think probably I stopped doing obstetrics about a little over 2 years ago. So my sleep cycle was really screwed up for a very long time. And that was very bad for me. It's so interesting to me now. If I don't get enough sleep, I see how I feel so depressed. My attitude about life is bad. Like my perspective on my day-to-day is completely altered. And I think like, whoa, how did I do that? This is very dangerous. You're making decisions. So I really protect my sleep. I grow a lot of things in my backyard. Of course, I live in Los Angeles, so doing the best I can, right? I mean, the air is the air, the water is the water. I do have water filters. Water filters in the garden and water filters inside.
I increasingly believe that, you know, making sure that your water is clean and your air is clean. Your air is clean in part. This is actually an area where I've kind of like evolved. I probably wouldn't have put as much focus on air quality up until the past year, but learning about, or maybe the past 2 years. But for one, we know that air pollution is now recognized as a modifiable risk factor for dementia.
Oh, really?
So,
for dementia?
Yeah.
I do have filters, actually.
Yeah, I think it's important. We know that these, you know, innumerable VOCs that we're exposed to have endocrine disrupting effects.
So I live in a house that I bought when I was pregnant with my 26-and-a-half-year-old son. And, you know, we're the third family to live in this house, which is so interesting. The house was built in 1927. We ultimately moved out and remodeled it in like 2008. And at that time, we did as sustainable remodel as possible. So, and I had kids. I was very, very, I mean, I've always been aware of this. This is not new to me. So all the paint, all the carpet, you know, was low VOC or no VOC. Although it's funny because the paint is super sticky. But I'm like, whatever, it's better than all those like organic compounds in the home that I'm raising small children. You know, cork floors, just whatever. Like I didn't, and again, I'm privileged. I get that.
Yeah.
Most people cannot do this because this house had like mold in it and all sorts of weird stuff, right? And I'm going to tell you something. I was like a allergy kind of person growing up. I grew up in an older home here in LA, and there was I think there was tons of mold in the house and a lot of dampness, and I had really bad allergies. My brother had asthma. And when we redid this house and moved back in, I don't really have any of those things anymore. It was really interesting.
Wow.
So, I mean, my environment it's the basics. It's your environment. I'm not doing 70,000 supplements. I mean, I do vitamin D, I take magnesium, I do some functional mushroom stuff. But I try to stay on top of my fiber, my protein, organics, sleep. I try to get my feet outside. I live in LA. I'm lucky. I have a backyard. I'm lucky. I go outside. My cat likes to be outside. She has a supervised garden visit because she's a crazy bitch, and she'll go into the backyard and go into the most dangerous construction site possible if I let her. So it's good for everybody. And, you know, I garden and I do things outside with my body. I move. I work out. I have my trainer twice a week, and I do yoga and I walk to work if I can. I could go on. It's nothing fancy. Most of it's pretty basic stuff. It's doable.
Yeah.
And I'm creaky, but that's okay.
So am I.
Still going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Well, it sounds like you prioritize though your well-being, your like self-care.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and I have a lot of love around me. I'm super lucky. I have an amazing boyfriend. My kids are great. My family, they're crazy, but I love them. My friends are awesome. Like the other thing, listen, that epidemic of isolation and how loneliness is more dangerous than cigarette smoking.
Yeah.
So for people who are like, I can't control the filters, you know what? Just don't isolate. If you cannot, you know what? Doing this is not connecting.
Yeah, holding phone.
This is not connecting. I mean, it's kind of, but not really.
Yeah.
It's not. Like, be with people.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. Well, thanks for coming out.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So fun.
I know.
Where can people find you on social media, support your work? Oh, and pick up your book, too.
Oh, yeah. You should pick up my book. Everything can be found at my website, thedrsuzanne.com, and you can find all my social. I'm most active on Instagram, Ask Dr. Suzanne, and I also have another, the Menopause Bootcamp. So my book is out there, and for people who are interested in menopause and want to promote the grassroots movement that is menopause awareness, I have a Menopause Bootcamp certification program. So it's not like a master class on how to treat menopause. It's for actual regular humans who want to create community. So, combating isolation, combating misinformation, creating an opportunity for people to come together, to educate, to support. And it's a great practice builder, honestly, for, professionals, therapists, health coaches, whatever. So that's been really fun.
Wow.
Yeah. And you can watch me on Drew Barrymore.
On Drew Barrymore? Are you her
I'm the medical correspondent.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, boy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. This was super fun. I learned a lot. Thanks again.
It was so great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank you, Sydney, for sitting in.
Sydney, for being our inspiration.
We love City Scent. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.